Welcome back to another episode of the Positive Persistence Podcast. I am your host, Ian Bowen, and today I am joined by two amazing people. One, as you guys already know, is my co-host today, my beautiful wife, Dana. And we are joined by fitness professional and health and fitness coach, Brookes Coleman. Brookes, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited to talk with you today.
Super excited to have you here and love the topic that we're going to be talking about. So Brookes is a health and fitness professional who's had multiple certifications in nutrition, blood chemistry, and metabolic flexibility. He coaches busy professionals that want to lose fat and build muscle without losing the things that are important to them. His philosophy is that fitness is 10% what you do and 90% how you stick with it. With a unique blend of acceptance and commitment therapy combined with simplifying a strategy for his clients to get out of their own way. Brookes teaches the science of losing fat and the art of keeping it off. And I love that tagline.
Yes.
Brookes, again, welcome to the show. Super excited to talk to you about health and fitness because, as you know, that is in our wheelhouse. So you have a very interesting story, and we'd kind of just like to start it off with hearing from you kind of where you started your fitness journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite a ways back, definitely. Growing up, actually what led me to the gym originally was delayed puberty. So I was pretty good at sports in high school, and then everybody else grew, and I went into high school like close to 100 pounds. And like obviously that wasn't very conducive for football. So took online to the blogs and the forums to try to look up how to get bigger, which wasn't very successful. Looking back, I would have like just told myself to basically just drink 5,000 calories a day. But, that kind of inevitably led to 10 years of just like getting sucked into all these marketing gimmicks from back in the day. And that ended up evolving, of course, and finally found some success at some point. But I'd say in that time, I really got the runaround with pretty much every fad diet out there, just trying to get jacked at that point. Like was super embarrassed about it and wanted to grow and get stronger. So that was kind of what led me to dive in from the beginning. And of course, that's evolved over the past 17 years or so now. So that was kind of the start. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you tried kind of everything out there. Just give me a couple things, throw some stuff out. What kind of stuff did you try?
Yeah. So I think fasting, keto, meal plans, I think the protein gainers, I think the craziest combination, like one I did was termed carb backloading. Not sure if you ever heard of that one, but essentially okay, cool. That was I feel like I haven't seen that as much lately, but
tell our listeners just briefly what that is for people who aren't familiar.
So basically what you did was, this cracks me up. So you went full keto. You went full keto to start for like 2 weeks or something to like prime your body, And then after that, you would eat carbs only after your workouts. And I want to say that they encouraged you to get your workout in the evening. And then the way the carbs were going to be used after the workouts, because of the keto leading up to that and no carbs earlier in the day, it would like just make you grow 5 pounds of muscle a week, something crazy like that.
Wow.
Brookes, that's science. That is science.
Yeah.
5 pounds a week and muscle. Tell you, Brookes, I wish I had that program because like you, when I was younger and still now, I'm not a big guy and I've always wanted to gain weight and put on muscle, which is a whole
it wrong this whole time.
Which is a whole nother story on the opposite end of the spectrum. Because as you know, in the fitness industry, as coaches and fitness professionals, usually people come to us to lose weight, right? But there is a whole nother side of it where there's people that are really interested in wanting to put on weight and put on muscle. But like I said, that's a whole nother topic on a whole nother show. Anyway, back to the carb backloading craziness.
Yeah,
So what comes next?
I think I ended up combining it with like intermittent fasting at the same time. Like I think I was just like, as many fat diets I can stack together at the same time, that'll get it done. But inevitably, you know, I finally had enough. I went to school for finance, worked in that world for a little bit, and then I was just looking at this stuff all the time in my time off, you know, driving to and from work with the podcast, everything. So actually got a job at an exercise physiology lab in Nebraska and started to actually get involved with real research in exercise science and learning how to read research as well. And so finally started to kind of find the things that would work and did. But naturally, I was like, I went 110% into that. So then all of a sudden, you know, anything that was from like, if you think about things that make a difference as like, I recently heard the analogy of like, you know, you're floating down a river and there's boulders in the river, there's rocks in the river, and there's pebbles in the river. And ideally, you know, you get the boulders out of the way. You focus on those big boulders to keep you from getting in your own way or stopping yourself from making progress. But a lot of stuff online and strategies are people focusing on the pebbles, right? And it's like, hey, we've got this massive boulder in front of us. Let's just get that out instead of picking up these tiny pebbles. So anyways, I naturally just started doing everything, you know, like as much cardio as possible, as much strength training as possible, as much sleep optimization as possible, any recovery modalities, eating every 2 hours, dialing in everything. And it did work. But ultimately, all of a sudden I realized like, all right, I don't even have a social life now because I'm so focused on my sleep or whatever it might have been. And so that was kind of
all consuming.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, how did you have time to do all of that?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think it really was family and social life suffered. So that was a big wake up moment too. So yeah, I'll stop there. I feel like I was rambling a bit.
No, I mean, I resonate with you because I've talked a lot about this, about fad diets, about trying everything, you know, growing up in the 90s and 2000s. We can go on and on about that as well. So I feel you. And I also feel that, you know, that going 100% and then it becoming unsustainable, right? So you're trying to do, you know what you're supposed to do. And like you knew you were working for an exercise physiology lab. And so you knew exactly what to do. And sometimes that's overwhelming just, you know, by itself. So I totally resonate.
Yeah. And what I find interesting, Brookes, is that you were doing all the things, which most people, they want to do all the things and they do their best, but they can't go 100% in all the things. And then they get burnt out and they don't get to their goal. But you did, which is an interesting twist to this story. Like you were doing all the things and you got to where you wanted to go. You had your dream body. You were at, as you call, optimal levels in what you wanted to achieve. So kind of take us from there. Like after that happened, what came next?
Yeah. So, and I'll just throw a side note in here that like myself looking back at like, I mean, this is probably, I don't know, 8 years ago. Looking back, I think in some way, shape, or form, everyone that's taking on this fitness pursuit, it's ultimately to just be more present in their relationships and in their daily life. Whether that's a roundabout way or not. And I think that's what was underlying these attempts at getting in better shape, like optimizing all these things, but subconsciously. So then you get there and you're kind of like, well, I'm not like happy all the time. And then so like it's that natural like progression of like just discovering more about yourself. So like that's my view from now. But at that point, you know, it was probably not even that conscious at that point. So I ended up actually going into the fire department. Still hadn't thought about fitness as a career. Got a job there, and can't really optimize sleep on the fire department. Can't really optimize workouts on the fire department because you're working 24-hour shifts. You're getting woke up in the middle of the night, and then you got to make up for that sleep the next day. Your schedule's like crazy. And really, like, this bulletproof approach I thought was so science-backed and just unstoppable came crashing down because I couldn't optimize everything anymore. And that was really a wake-up call. But it forced me to be like, okay, maybe instead of doing everything, it's the 80-20 principle, right? What are the 20% of actions that are leading to 80% of the results? So not only looking at the science of what has an impact, but considering the size of that impact and the amount of investment it takes on what it takes away from the rest of your life. So totally different lens, like best bang for our buck. And that's when I started to really tone things back, and surprise, surprise, it didn't destroy everything. And I actually was able to kind of find that in between zone where I had good social relationships and still had those pieces of life that are probably more important to our overall health than like that last 2% of fitness progress. So that was the big pivot for me that kind of put me on the track to where I am now.
That's so interesting that you were able to get to that point too mentally, because I feel like so many people shut down, right? And that's why they need coaches. That's why they need someone to kind of pull them along or hold their hand for a while. So I think I'm kind of in awe of you because you were, you had that in you to just say, okay, this didn't work. Now I need to step back. I need to adjust. So it was really impressive.
Yeah. What would you say, Brookes, if looking back, once you ran into all those roadblocks and because obviously you were a very highly disciplined individual to be able to do all the things all the time to get you into that optimal peak performance and body type and body shape. But then, as you said, you've got this new job, and all of a sudden now you can't optimize everything. For some people, they would just throw their hands up and be like, I can't do this anymore. And then their fitness would just tank. So can you share with us, like, what were some of maybe the tactics or maybe the self-talk or the mindset, or what helped you stay on track to be able to focus on the things that you could do and not focus on the things that you couldn't do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think for a little bit, I tried to kind of force it and rely on more, get off a 24-hour shift and still go to the gym if we didn't sleep that night before, take a bunch of pre-workout. And it was kind of like an element of getting just like beat into submission that like, hey, it's not going to work anymore. Like there were some back issues going on, like, just lifting heavy a lot. And so I think there was an element there, but then once that kind of faded and it was more acceptance, I think at 100% was starting to turn to more of the mindset side and zoom out a little bit and view and kind of start to ask questions about why I'm doing things I'm doing. And that was like the initial seed of starting to see like, okay, like how does this fit into this big picture? But I think the fire department was a big feature in that too, because you could work out at the station during certain hours of the day, but you get calls and you'd have to drop everything and go, like, and then it's like if you're trying to crush yourself with aerobics or aerobic development and heavy deadlifts, and then you get a fire, it's like, all right, so are we training to be good at our job, or is our training taken away from our performance at our job? So I think there was definitely a few pieces that came together to kind of like start that light bulb moment for sure.
Okay. So eventually you are not on the, you've quit the fire department, right? You've moved forward. So where do you go then after that?
Yeah. So at that time, really was starting to see how many friends and family were falling into the same traps I had been into with this
Yeah.
all or nothing thinking, with this marketing gimmicks, with these stories online about why they can't see progress,
Mhm.
and started to just help them kind of informally. And it went really well. I was lucky enough to have a buddy who he was around 300 pounds, and I helped guide him to lose 100 pounds.
Wow.
And I always say that, like, I was just the caddy, and for all of our clients, even today, like, we're the caddy on the golf course. We're not doing the work. We're not, making the real change, but we're there as a guide. And so that was the first kind of moment for me that was like, wow, I can really help people here, because I saw, the relief on his end to find out that, like, some sugar's okay or whatever
Yeah.
it may be, and still see progress and actually have that balance with his family and his career, like I started to find. And so fast forward, kind of kept helping people informally, and then really started to take paid clients, and it just reinforced how much I really enjoyed it. And so that ultimately led me to leaving to do this full time. And yeah, that kind of brings us up to today.
Yeah. And I do want, just before we get into data fit and what you're doing now with coaching, I do love the content that you put out. So uh, I'm a big fan. I'm a heavy follower on Instagram. So that's actually how we kind of connected, was because I would share your stuff almost daily. I would share something because it really resonated, and it's so on point with what we talk about at Fit Body Boot Camp and just in our daily lives. And so I was like, this guy is on it, like he's got it. And so I do love how you talk about people's relationship with food. And you were just talking when you were coaching your friend down that 100 pounds, and talking to him about, you even talk about fast food. Like, fast food isn't poison, but it's not going to do the same things for you that fruits and vegetables and whole grains are going to do. But it's okay once in a while, right? And you talk about the 80-20 mindset. And I just love that sustainability factor, because so many people think it's all or nothing. And that's so defeating, because then once they think they've eaten, say, a bad food, then they're bad, and they internalize that. And I just love your messaging. So if you want to talk maybe a little bit about that and just kind of the messaging that you put out, I would love to share that with our listeners.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it can definitely, with everything out there, it can definitely get it can feel monotonous and boring a little bit, because it's
Yeah.
simple, but it's true, and it's not the sexy story that goes around. And unfortunately, those stories are the ones that get promoted a ton. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it really is that I think it relates just back to where I was at. There's optimal, and there's things that can help, and then there's the domain of, okay, at what cost? So if
Right.
we think of, if someone's sitting on the couch every day eating fast food 3 times a day, not working out, not
Right.
moving, not taking care of themselves, the amount of trade-off they're going to get and the things they need to focus on are only going to make their life better. But then we talk about these people that start to get to healthy levels of body fat and start to
Mhm.
get to, that 80-20, where they're seeing the payoff and losing some body fat, or, I'm always a fan of more muscle for everybody.
Yes. Yes.
Big muscle fan, but
Us too.
but
Absolutely.
good. Yeah, it's tough to have too much there, unless we're getting into bodybuilding worlds where it can be detrimental. But for 99% of people, but like, there's a point at which losing more body fat is going to take away from your social life, and it's going to take away from your mental health, and it's going to
Mhm.
have side effects on your hormone profile. And that's a very important consideration to make. So there's optimal, and then there's like that 80-20 zone where we can live in that realm of maximum results with maximum life enjoyment, or living the life you want to live, living by your values. So that's always what I encourage people to consider. A big part of that also gets misconstrued is it's just tough depending on who you're talking to, right? Because if, there's a lot of messaging out there to people that are not eating enough. And yeah, there's a subset of our population that have been chronically dieting for a very long time.
Sure.
And it is important for them to switch their mindset to eat more food and lift some weights instead of getting away from the cardio. That's also a small percentage of our population. And I'd say the vast majority of our population is actually just eating a lot more than they realize.
Right. They're under calculating the amount of calories that they're taking in and the amount of energy that they're expending. I think that that's very common.
And then naturally, people cling on to things, and it's so tough. So I really try to make my message just simple for as many people as possible, I guess.
And I just wanted to add, and I'm sorry, I have a lot to say to Brookes because I've been following him for so long and I've been waiting for this conversation. So I'm like, okay, Ian, you just you just sit while I talk to while I fangirl over here. But I was just going to say or ask, how hard is it to fight against all of the other influencers and people on Instagram and TikTok, and even just somebody's friend who says, "Oh, I took this pill or cleanse or this," and so how hard is that to work against in your line of business and our line of business too? But
it's tough. Because naturally, like, human mind goes to like, oh, I need to correct this person or solve this for them. And like, it really is. There's a great example of, I'm sure you've heard of Brett Contreras. He's the Glute Lab guy. Very evidence-based guy. A video came out that was completely false, and he debunked the myth. Yeah. And the original video had like 10 million views, and his got like 10,000 views. So it's because it doesn't go. The algorithm doesn't take it. It's not polarizing. It's not what people want to hear. And so, I think it's for those that are really trying to focus on the science-backed side, anti-BS, and like what's truly going to make change. I don't know. It's just like, who can we impact? Who's ready to hear it? Because all those people that are hearing the other stuff and getting sucked into it, I don't think, you could say they're not ready to hear the things that people might share with them. And eventually they will be, because it's a loop. It
definitely is.
We can only hope that eventually, like you say, they'll be ready to hear the message at the right time, and then they'll take action. And as you mentioned, that your message, as you said, can be monotonous. It can be boring. But as we know, that's what health and fitness is all about, right? It is about being monotonous and boring and doing the unsexy things consistently over time, because we know that that's what brings results. The flash in the pan, magic potions and diet pills, we know that the quick fixes, they don't work. But as you said, that's what gets all the views, because that's what people want. They want convenience. They want quick. They want overnight success. But we know, especially when we're dealing with statistics and data and research, that just isn't how it's done. And, you had a post a couple of days ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, actually, where you listed like 50 different points of things that you've learned so far along your journey. And one of them I love is that if you can't do your diet for the rest of your life, you shouldn't be doing it at all. Right. Yeah, and that's kind of true. I think that kind of sums up like the perfect catchphrase or phrase or mentality or mindset or whatever you want to call it for just health and fitness in general. Yeah. Like, if it's not sustainable, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
I love that. So I'm going to kind of lay that out there for you to kind of expound on, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny because like I'm sure you guys have witnessed this in your clients too. Like people come in asking about an end date or a what after type of scenario, which
Sure.
there's some cases where like to get there it might be a little bit different than what it takes to maintain it,
Mm-hmm.
or a temporary goal. You know, if you're a bodybuilder, obviously that's a different story, or whatever it may be. But for the vast majority of people, I think a big theme there is just zooming out. They, you know, we cling to something in 60 days or something in 6 months. And if it's just like, okay, what would you be doing right now if your goal, if you wanted to be there in 5 years instead of 5 months? How would that change what you're doing? Because we get into this temporary mindset of like, I just have to grind through this and then all my problems are going to be solved. I always like to say that the temporary components of a body composition change should be the amount you're eating, not what you're eating. Because it can be normal to maybe bring calories lower than what you're going to be eating longer term. But the food that makes up those calories should look the exact same. Because if all of a sudden we get done and we're like, all right, now you can have carbs again, you've not been like, we can be working through the educational side and the intuitive eating side alongside our goal if we are focusing on something we see ourselves doing long term. So yeah, and it's always interesting because then all of a sudden people get like 3-4 months into a sustainable approach and they're like, oh, I'm not worried about stopping doing this. Like it's become part of who I am. And that's what change takes, right? Instead of like this person that went into it doing this and going back to what they're doing before, it'll never work.
Right.
And I think ironically, a lot of the people I talk to when I'm like, what do you want to do differently when you get to this goal? A lot of the times they're like, I want to be active. Like that's what they do want to do. It's just getting them out of their own way to do it in the first place.
So you're
Not,
asking them
go ahead.
to find their why, right?
Right.
To find why are they really doing this? Why do they really want this?
Yes. Yes, 100%. And the cool part about that is you can live. So like in what I do, your why or your values, how will this lead to you living by your values? But the cool part is you can live by your values tomorrow. It doesn't matter how much weight you've lost. It doesn't matter, how many diets you've tried in the past. You can start living by your values. Well, I just said tomorrow, but today. And so
sure, right
that's
now.
where if we align their goal with those values, it becomes that's what leads to long-term change. 1,000%.
Absolutely.
Another quote that I saw, and I really want to talk about this, and I want you to kind of explain this as much as you can, because I think that people don't understand this. At least a large majority of people don't understand this, that faster weight loss leads to muscle loss and a higher likelihood of gaining the weight back. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that is confusing for people. And again, as humans, we want to get there as quickly as we can, the easiest way possible.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, first and foremost, in literature, in the big picture, we see that the faster it's lost to a certain extent is a higher likelihood or a higher percentage of muscle loss. And so then you're losing less fat, and then a higher likelihood of weight regain after that weight loss, which probably doesn't surprise most people. Classic yo-yo dieting.
Yeah.
I do want to highlight, like, okay, some people might hear that and be like, well, I think I have enough muscle. Like, I don't really care. The reason that, so weight is your weight, but muscle mass literally leads to a higher amount of calorie burn while you sleep. It's so much more than like an ego thing or, how much you can lift in the gym. It improves your blood sugar control. As we look at growing older, what's one of the biggest causes of injury in adults is falling. And,
Yeah.
you fall and break a hip. Well, your muscles are what keep you upright and fight gravity every day. So like, I think people kind of hear muscle and they think like, oh, like, bodybuilder type thing. But it's also the number one thing that's going to change how you look at any given weight and lead to looking toned. And the other piece about that is you can look how you want at like 10, 15 pounds heavier than what you have in mind. So then you get to eat more food, and you get to eat more food. You have more flexibility, and your body weight maintenance long term is just going to be way easier to attain. But aside from that, I always try to highlight like slow and steady, especially because a lot of people don't come from a place with a lot of muscle mass, or they haven't been lifting weights consistently.
Right.
So if we restrict calories too much, energy can drop, gym performance can drop.
Yes.
You're more likely to skip your workouts. And the cool part about getting someone into the gym and lifting weights and eating enough protein is that they can put on muscle and lose fat at the same time.
Absolutely.
So if that's going on and the scale isn't really changing, the last thing we want to do is be like, all right, 500 less calories a day, because we're interrupting that process, because we want to get the best bang for our buck during that phase while it can be happening.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying we shouldn't be losing weight depending on the individual, but slow and steady. And that's why I always recommend track your gym performance, track body measurements, track photos. Those things are going to show you that change when you might get super frustrated looking at the scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. That's something that we preach to our members and our clients, that the scale is not the end all be all, because it can be misleading.
Yes. I want to get into the company that you've started. It's called DataFit, and you are training online. You have online clients, and you've trained over 200 people. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been doing this for about 2 years formally, but coaching online for about 5 years total.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
And Brookes, before you do, just to clarify, do you specifically target busy professionals as your clients? Because that's kind of where you were in terms of having a job, being busy, but still making time to be healthy.
Yeah. I kind of bucket in like, we're all busy, right? So parents, like I'd say our like typical age is like 35 to 55. Mostly women, not for any specific reason. It's just happened that way. But yeah, because I'll have people message me and be like, hey, I'm not a busy professional, but I'm a stay-at-home mom.
Sure.
And I'm like, that's as professional, that's exactly.
It's busy.
Yeah. Yeah. So anybody that's, and really it sounds, kind of cheesy, because it's like, it's almost everybody, right? Like we all just want more time in our life. Like we feel restricted on time. We need to get good direction, to get like a plan that works for us, not against us.
Yeah. So how does your program work? Yeah.
So, like you said, we do everything online. It is delivered through an app. We do both nutrition and training. And then, with that comes the mindset side, or whatever you want to call it. So that is all delivered through an app. We do everything one-on-one. So we don't do any like group training or anything like that. I think that's just been our kind of bread and butter. It's like, we're going to, we're going to help people best as we can. We're going to give them everything they need, instead of like kind of living in between, especially remotely. Like, I think it requires a specific level of attention to make sure people are able to get that change they want. But anyways, we deliver, a simplified plan that's going to be doable for them, and it's different for everybody, right? But
great.
That's all delivered through an app. We do a weekly check-in with them, have unlimited messaging with them throughout the week, and then we have a group component in addition to that. So we'll do some challenges. I'll do a group call every week for anybody that wants to join. So anybody looking for that community component in addition to their one-on-one coaching relationship, we have that element as well.
I love that. That accountability is important.
That's huge. And having that community piece as well is really important to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. And to be able to connect and see your face, who's actually training them. I know you said you have 2 coaches who work with you. So to be able to see them and connect is important. So you are giving fitness and nutrition training, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So
because you're pretty steeped in nutritional training. You have a couple of different certifications in nutrition, correct?
Yeah. I'd say a little heavier on the nutrition side, and then the personal training comes alongside that. But as you know, as this conversation has kind of gone, like, biggest part is getting them consistent with something, because most of the people coming in, like, of course we love to periodize a good resistance training plan for somebody, but the reality is a lot of the times factor number 1 is consistency with just a few days a week at first, and just getting in there. And the progression's going to kind of take care of itself if we can get them consistent.
Yeah. And stacking those small wins, right? So not trying to do everything at once, because we know how that is overwhelming and tends to, people will shut down. And so just getting them to stack those small habits and the small wins is invaluable.
Yeah. 100%. Changing that, a lot of people naturally have this storyline going in their heads about how they are a failure or they can't do this, and giving themselves the evidence to the contrary can be super powerful. Not that it has to be through action, which action is most important, but we can work on, kind of both sides of that, that thought process or story.
Absolutely.
Brookes, can you tell us some of the testimonials that you've had from some of your clients? Like, what are a couple of your favorite testimonials from people that you've worked with,
or success stories?
Yeah. So one of the first that comes to mind actually probably isn't like a typical client we have. This was someone who actually came from a physique competition background. And so that really ingrained that all or nothing mindset in her mind, because, now has a family, has a career, doesn't have the time to do cardio every day, eat every 2 hours, track macros to the T. So that was like such an incredible mindset shift when I was able to basically take her time investment from like, I don't know, 15 hours a week to like 5. And still get her like 90% of the progress. So that was a really cool one for me, just because it was such a great view of that shift and tweak in her experience, and it immediately gave back to her entire life. The first one I mentioned, who I helped lose 100 pounds. So since then, I mean, that was like 5, maybe 6 years ago. I can't remember. Since then, we've really focused on body recomposition, because he did have some loose skin and, didn't have as much muscle as he'd like. And so in the time since he initially got down that 100 pounds, he's since lost another 20, but it's been a totally different ball game of focusing on pushing the weights, focusing on eating more protein, and then ultimately getting him to a body weight he's comfortable maintaining, and then shifting his mindset to like, all right, let's eat as much food as we physically can instead of still living in this low calorie world. So that's been like a cool one to just see like transform over time, like goals change.
Yeah. That's
exactly.
Amazing. That is amazing. Yeah. Good on them. And that's totally 2 different stories, which shows that, the versatility of the program that you have. Somebody who's coming from bodybuilding, doing shows, I'm assuming, and then someone who needs to lose fat and then eventually gain muscle. So that's, two totally different success stories. I love that.
How do these people feel about themselves now?
I love that question because so many people come in thinking that feeling a certain way is dependent on the way their body looks or their results. And it's like all of a sudden we work on changing the way they feel, and that can contribute to the way their body looks ultimately. So it's kind of like that catch 22 of like the chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been a huge one because people are always like worried, if they go out of town or holidays come up, or they're like, I don't know, maybe I should do it like next spring. It's like, there's nothing on the scale. There's nothing
Start
in the
now.
mirror. There's nothing that, we can accomplish here. I don't care about that. I mean, I do care about that, but like, I don't,
Right.
because if we can get you to change, like you said, the way you feel and build confidence in yourself to do this and actually stick with it, that is 1,000 times more valuable than any transient results we can get. So
yeah,
I think that's the most like meaningful part. I'm sure it's similar for you guys, but for me,
yes.
Seeing the transition in like just how they hold themselves
Yes.
is the coolest part of this industry, I think.
Yeah, I resonate with that so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that like that's why the stacking the small wins is so empowering for people, and it just gives them that confidence inside the gym or where they're training. And also then they, like you said, they walk out and they're standing up taller and they feel good. And so that's why it's so important, like you said, to not just focus on that end goal, but to focus on those steps, those habits, and everything that's happening along the way. And one of my favorite speakers, I always have to drop this in, but Henry Amar, he says, love yourself where you're at, but love yourself enough not to stay there. And so I think that kind of fits in with what you're saying. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that too, because that's like, it can be, a paradox for sure. I love that quote. I'm going to use that. One thing I've said is like, love yourself now, but also
Mhm.
love your future self. And how can you love your future self? Healthy food, moving your body. Like these are all things we know are going to benefit your future self. So like that question of like, well, loving myself, I'm just going to sit on the TV and like pig out on a bunch of pizza or whatever it may be. It's like, well, is that loving your future self as well? And I don't mean to demonize like that scenario. Sometimes for some people, being able to enjoy a night of pizza guilt-free is also the ultimate act of self-love.
Of course.
But
it's just a not all the time thing.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
So yeah, it's okay to accept yourself and also want to change something.
Yeah. So make those changes, and you're helping people do that. And I love that. One thing that I did want to ask about, as we kind of start to wrap this up, but we talked a little bit and you had mentioned acceptance and commitment therapy. And I'm not familiar with that. I can imagine maybe our listeners are not as well. So can you tell us a little bit about why that's important in the process?
Yeah. I'll do my best to do a kind of brief overview, but essentially the practice of acceptance and commitment therapy is that, life gets tough.
Mm-hmm.
Life gets tough externally. Life gets tough internally with our thoughts and emotions. And essentially in those moments that come up every day, thousands of times a day, we're always doing something, and we can move in line with our values and the person we want to be, or we tend to get uncomfortable with what's going on, thoughts and feelings wise,
yes,
and want to make it go away.
Yes.
And typically when we do that, it takes us away from our values long term. So case in point, you are having cravings, or you're hungry, or you're stressed. And in that moment, like zoom out, big picture, you don't want to eat 6 donuts because it doesn't align with your values and your goals. But
Sure.
in the moment, tasty food, which is everywhere, is very effective at a temporary relief from emotional discomfort.
Yes.
So the whole idea of ACT is learning skills to allow your experience and be willing to open up and have discomfort and take action that is in line with your values and goals anyways. So I
That's
would,
powerful.
it's fantastic. I really like it because we do tend to, talking with clients or hearing people online, whatever it may be, like there's this ingrained thought or fusion with stories in our head that I need to be more motivated or I need to limit my excuses. And it creates this barrier between where we are and where we want to be because we think there are conditions for achieving that involve completely doing away with anything uncomfortable.
Right.
And if you can just, it's like, it takes a while to kind of register that, but if you can just like go around that obstacle instead of waiting for it to leave, it's incredible. So, all that to say, it's been shown to be quite effective for things that can lead to long-term weight maintenance, and as well as some more mental challenges and things like that. And I really like it because you can do training with ACT without being a certified therapist or whatever. So sorry, that was a long spiel, but that's kind of like the basis of the work.
Yo, I love that. I feel like that could be a whole
that's really cool.
different topic for another day, but it's because Ian always says you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
It's true.
Yes.
So
yeah,
we resonate with that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Brookes, you do a wonderful job of kind of demystifying and debunking and
Yes.
kind of just getting down to really the nitty gritty of what you need to do to become successful in a health journey. So I'm wondering if you could share with our viewers and with our listeners, if they want to get started and they feel like they are just lost in this wilderness of information, what would be some of the simple core actions that they can take to get started, get some momentum, get some wins under their belt? What are the little things that they can start doing now so they can start making progress towards their future self?
Absolutely. Yes. So big picture, I'm always focused if you're overwhelmed, like we said, there's probably a lot of low hanging fruit for you to get great progress without completely overhauling your life. And so many people are under the impression that any approach needs to be about what not to do. And that just ingrains this scarcity mindset, this stress right off the bat. I always like to focus on the lowest hanging fruit that can just be more of something that is going to inevitably lead to less of the things that are getting in the way without even having to think about that. So I would say big picture, like if you're ready to get started on one thing, the number one thing I'd recommend is a bare minimum of some strength training, whether it's at home with dumbbells and bands, or it's at a box gym with machines, or it's at a community gym. Literally just 2 days a week of that. If that's the only change you made for 6 months, that's the number one thing I'd recommend. On the nutrition side, I usually am focused on protein first. It's very filling, but it also supports body recomposition. And once again, we're focusing on more of something instead of less of this food. Don't eat that. Don't eat that. Like that's a very tough place to be mentally. Yes. And with more protein, we just end up getting less of those other foods anyways, because we're way more full. One other quick small one is get more steps, walk more, get a 5-minute walk in the morning or at night. It's a tiny little thing that can have downstream effects on sleep, energy. Like it's a little bit meditative, can really kind of be stress relieving. So those are kind of like a few of just like right off the bat, like those things can change your life and they're not scary. Maybe resistance training can be scary for some people, but it's like we want something that is like,
It's manageable.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
You can find time, you can make time to fit those things into your schedule without moving a ton of pieces.
Right. Yes. And we all know that consistency is key, but we also know, you've already mentioned this, that sometimes life happens and you fall off the wagon. And there's another bullet point that you mentioned that I love, and that's a shitty day won't set you back, but letting it turn into two will.
Yeah, and I've had a couple of people be like, "Well, I let it turn into two, throw it," and it's like, no, zoom out, like change it to a week. Like it's just that sunk cost fallacy of like, what's done is done.
Yes.
And I think that ability to bounce back every single time you're off track is the best skill you can cultivate.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going,
Yep.
at some point, it's going to happen. So yeah,
Exactly.
having that skill to be resilient it's a game changer for sure.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely guaranteed. And I think that's such a big part of what people are doing is like they have so many people I talk to, they have plan A and it's like, well, what's plan B? And they're like, well, no, I'm just going to do it. And it's like, well, what if you don't? And then they go from plan A to nothing. And if we can just build like that gray area instead of the black and white thinking of like, okay, if everything else goes out the window, what is one thing you can do no matter what you're eating, no matter where you are, whether you have a phone or an app, whether you feel motivated or not? What is the bare minimum? Because then like building that stair step down from the plan A to that middle ground can have such a huge impact long term, because so many people think like, oh, I just have to be better on the days I'm on top of it. It's like, no, we just have to kind of cut the damage on those days that are going so far the other direction.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk to people all the time. And it's like, well, I had a donut for breakfast. We had donuts at the office. So I had a donut for breakfast. And then it was like, well, I might as well just, the whole day's wasted. Yeah. So, I mean, that quote can be like, you can have a shitty minute,
Yeah,
you can have
exactly.
a moment of what some people would call like weakness or whatever. And then you could get back on track the next minute. So
yeah,
it's all about flipping that mindset, right?
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Yeah, yeah, because we could even think about a diet as like 4 quarters in the day rather than one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sports analogies. We love that. So I love that. I love talking with you, Brookes. You are just such a wealth of information, and I feel like we could go on and on. If we wanted to find you, if our listeners, viewers want to find you, where are we going to look?
Yeah, Instagram's the easiest way. That's like my primary platform. So you could probably just search Brookes Coleman, or I think my handle is the Brookes Coleman.
Yeah.
So you can find out everything going on over there.
Okay, so there's a ton of information. You guys who are listening and watching, if you want to just scroll through the rabbit hole of Brookes Coleman nutrition and fitness, you will absolutely be inspired. I always am.
Yeah, a lot of great information out there.
Yes.
That you put out there, Brookes. So
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Brookes. So it has been a pleasure having you on the show.
So great.
Yeah, I really do encourage our viewers and our listeners to go check out Brookes on Instagram, the Brookes Coleman, and check out all of the wealth of information that he's putting out there. Again, it is simple, it is easy, and it is really things that you can implement in your life and take action on right away, which is key. So our ask is, if you found value in this episode, please give us a thumbs up, give us a like, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You can also find more information about positive persistence at ianbowen.net. And also check out our blog, newsletter, and look for the positive persistence on all of our socials. So that is it for this episode. Again, I want to thank my co-host, my lovely wife, Dana, and Brookes Coleman for being on with us. Do remember, be positive, be persistent, and always know that mindset is everything. We'll see you next time.